So this happened when I was around 10. I live in a relatively small country, and it only took a couple of hours' drive to get from my house to my aunt's in another country. We were driving a country road when this battered-looking minivan started driving in front of us at a roundabout. We were the only two cars on the road, but there were some gardening tools and a tarp in the back of the window. It was clear the driver was either drunk, high, or just an absolute idiot. They were repeatedly swerving out of their lane like they were a video game protagonist or something. It was a hot day, so both of our cars had the windows down so we could hear what sounded like a sermon blasting from their radio. We drove behind them for roughly 7 minutes with my mum muttering about the state of the country. The minivan abruptly stopped in the middle of the road, which ticked off my mum. The driver did an illegal U-turn, during which two things happened. I saw the driver's face. He was a skinny middle-aged man with dirty yellow hair and a beard, and we both got a good look at each other's license plates. The driver turned into the opposite lane and drove past us, heading back into the hall, still driving erratically and almost hitting us. After he was gone, my mum pulled over and called the police to report him, giving them his license plate and a description of his appearance. The cop thanked us and promised to get right onto it. Then, we were nearly home and my mum got a call from the guards where they told her that they had arrested the guy who had warrants for drug dealing and domestic abuse. My mum was thanked and we all joked about her being a hero over pizza that night. Cut to a few weeks later, when school had started up again, I had gone with my dad to the hardware store. While my dad was at the checkout, I was looking out at the parking lot when I saw the battered minivan driving out of the lot. I didn't see the driver though, so I convinced myself it was only a coincidence, although my dad noticed that I seemed uneasy for the rest of the night. A few days later, my mum came home early from work looking like she had just run a marathon. She gave me and my brothers tight hugs and we were sent to bed earlier than usual that night. And I didn't learn about this next part until last year. The reason my mum was acting so weird is because her secretary had reported seeing a strange man inspecting the license plates of my mum's car. My mum asked what the man looked like and froze when she was given the description of the guy that we had reported. That weekend, my mum didn't want any of us kids leaving the house, but I was a stubborn little turd and all but demanded to be allowed out for a quick walk around the neighborhood. While I was out and roughly 15 minutes walk away from my house, a vehicle drove past me and it was the minivan, and the same man was in the driver's seat giving me a friendly nod. As soon as he was out of sight, I ran back home and told my parents, who immediately bundled us all into my dad's car and drove to stay the night at Grandma's. I was put into the guest room, but had zero chance of falling asleep, so I was wide awake for all the drama that happened that night. My parents called the cops and informed them about the man stalking us. A couple of hours later, a squad car pulled up outside and the officers told my parents everything. When they arrived to our house, they had discovered the front door had been forced open. Some of our nicest possessions had been smashed and were left in shards on the floor. But that's not the worst part. No, the worst part was where the police found the man. In the pantry, holding what a female officer described as the biggest damn knife I've ever seen. We spent the next few days at Grandma's while my parents handled the legal business. The man was sentenced to a life in a psychiatric hospital, and none of us have ever seen him since. But I dread to think what would have happened had I not gone for a walk that day. My senior year of high school, I started talking with this super good-looking emo punk kid named Brian on AIM, and I was all in. I had just been dumped by my loser HS boyfriend, and Brian was incredibly sweet and always knew what to say. There were some red flags for sure. Whenever I would finally convince him to send me a picture, he looked a little different in each photo. Like, they could have been pictures of different people, but it looked similar enough, and the guy liner was on point, so I just accepted it. We also never talked on the phone. I would beg him to let me call him, but he always would have an excuse. Finally, the summer before I left for college, he let me call him, and his voice was just super weird. My friend was convinced that it was like a 50-year-old woman, but I was like, hell no, this is Brian. I was so blinded that I just ignored every warning sign, and I told him everything. He knew all of my passwords, everything about my day-to-day life. Literally every single one of my friends told me that he wasn't real, that I needed to stop being a dumbass, but I honestly loved him. That fall, I left for college, and my first roommate was a total windbag who had a mile-long list of rules for the room. No boys ever allowed in, I wasn't allowed to touch her Left Behind series that she proudly displayed, no guests after 8, etc. So I was desperate to bounce. I found out that there was an empty room and requested a transfer for winter semester. I knew going in blind was a risk, but it couldn't be worse than Left Behind chick. At the same time, I was loving everything else about the college, though. Things with Brian kind of waned because, well, life is busy, and I wanted to experience everything, aka other dudes. He would call me 20 times a day, message me all the time, constantly barrage me about whether or not I had a Facebook account and wanted the password to it. Hell no, though. And finally, I broke things off for good. The next semester, I moved into my awesome new room. My roommate is a fellow freshman from MA who transferred that semester. She was loaded, brought basically everything we would both need for the room. Her mum even got us matching bedding from Pottery Barn, and it was awesome. She was a little weird and always wanted to hang out the first week, but I figured it was just nerves. The first weekend after classes started, I was chilling with some friends in the quad area, and she comes over and throws her keys at me and is like, "Having fun with these losers?" I was like, what the hell is going on? And I ended up sleeping at one of my girlfriend's rooms that night because I was super freaked out. And the next day, it was like nothing happened. We hung out that whole week. She was very perceptive and helpful. I was amped to have met what I thought was my college bestie. The next weekend, I convinced her to come out, and we're having a blast, dancing with dudes, and then things were escalating with me and soccer jocks, so I let her know that I was bailing. We were a 2-minute walk from the soccer house and came with a group, so I figured no big deal. I get back to the room later that night, and I see that just everything is torn up. Clothes ripped out of the closet, stuff all over the floor. She's sitting on my bed and her arm is bleeding. I ask her what the heck's going on, and she had broken my coffee cup and carved my initials in her arm. I run and get the RA because I'm not trying to get murdered, obviously. She ended up getting committed that night, and her parents flew down, and this is where things got really weird. She was actually Brian. She told her parents, and they told me. She had allegedly tried to start things with me as like her true self, applied to my school, and called the housing department to request me as a roommate, emailing housing from my email and requested her as my roommate, and then deleted all the emails. Her parents apologized and said that I could keep all the stuff in the room. They withdrew her from the classes, and then left. I got a no contact order, and it was the craziest story of my life. Alright, so I personally have had a lot of bad luck and visions lately, and I'm just looking for help. To sum it up, I've owned my house for 3 years, and recently, things have been happening. Lights blow out, and then I change the lights with the new bulbs, and they blow out again. My appliances have been breaking, dishwasher, dryer, refrigerator, and then I was in a car accident. I haven't been in one for 14 years. And there are many other occurrences that have happened in the past month in and out of my home too. Out of my house, I get taps on my shoulder and see shadows and someone waving from the backseat of my car through my rearview mirror. One night, I heard someone walk down my hallway, stop at my door, and then just walk away. I've also been having nightmares of battling a black cloud in my dreams and continuously reciting scriptures to keep it at bay. Today, I finally got my home camera working. It randomly died out a week ago. The video isn't great, but I was putting food in the microwave, then washed my hands, and I pet my dog, and from directly behind my head, I heard a loud growl or deep cough, and it chilled me to my bones, but I kept my composure and ignored it and pretended that it was my pup. It was not my dog, though, because I was staring right at her when the noise came from behind me in the kitchen. Someone I talked to suggested that maybe someone has cursed me, but I don't really know anyone who would do that. I'm just looking for answers though, but here's the video.